Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. An Aleph is a high point from which all things are visible, and from our vantage point, we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. Around here, our motto is to build up, be fair, and have fun. I said that in the wrong order. I'm your host, GriffinVarro, joined by your editor, Theta, our local designer, Norman Rafferty, and our good friend and GM, RedRabbit. When it comes to tabletop games, I have 15 years of experience running, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rule sets at the table. Pronouns he, him, they, them. Lessons. Why don't you go next?
Yes, Lessons Learned here on Twitch, Lessons Learned 1, he, him, also Lessons Learned over at YouTube. I also publish books over at Amazon. Night and Stars is still available for 99 cents. And I'm looking forward to talk about how much we allow players to hang themselves.
There we go.
Wink, wink,
Rafferty.
nod,
nod. You're next, Rafferty.
Oh, yeah. Hello. I'm Norman Rafferty, he, him. I work for Sanguine Games. I have been designing games for many, many years with the philosophy that we should let you take bigger and bigger risks. So we have a lot of petard because we expect a lot of hoisting.
And, of course, last but not least, Red.
The more petard, the more you can hoist. I like it. I'm RedRabbit. I'm running our Ironclaw game here on Wednesdays for the Ractus channel. I'm also playing in our Forbidden Lands game on Sunday, which is very exciting. Other than that, I'm running Vampire and Monster Care Squad right now. I own way more RPGs than I'll ever play.
There you go. And now on to today's topic. Are your players considering keeping that cursed artifact they just found? Are they weighing their options over how many royal guards they can take on before they're stopped? Or are your players looking back at the dragon they just successfully negotiated with and saying to themselves, you know what? They have a lot of treasure we could go steal. Players don't always make the smartest choices, but as a game master, it's your power to decide when the consequences of those choices come due. So today, we'll be talking about just how much leeway you should give your players when they decide to poke the demonic wasp nest. So, who would like to hang their players first? Lessons. Kill them.
I would basically simple. I take all the coiled rope, 100 foot or more, put in a table, figure they go like, do you want to do this? And then let them. As long as the players know you're clear, okay, this is going to be one of the possible results, like your imminent and total demise, possible, as we discussed last time, but it could happen in other ways, and they still do it, that's up to them. Player agency, baby. That's all it's
okay. I need some clarification on what exactly we're talking about here, though, then. Because I agree generally with Lessons. I like the idea of saying, hey, it's your game. Decide what you're going to do and let's see what happens. Because I agree with that, too. But if what we're talking about is how much bullshit you let them get away with before the world starts pushing back, that's a different conversation. Because they could say, we want to go and rob the Duke blind, and then they get caught doing that, and you say, well, they let you off with a warning because you're so darn charismatic or something. Like, that's a different situation, right? Like,
I do think they're the same, because that is a choice you could make as a GM to say, well, this is when the consequences should hit you, and I'm just not going to have them happen.
Well, related to that, it's the other side effect of the Mercer effect. I've also known to call this linear fever, where the players become meta aware that they're the heroes of the story. So it doesn't really matter what we do. This is the flip side of the conversation we already had. It doesn't really matter what we do, because if there's a planned adventure today, we'll go on it. So if we go rob the Duke and murder his daughter and blow up the house and burn the whole place and set it on fire and do horrible atrocities to the pets in the garden, they're still going to ask us to mount the assault against the Tyrant Queen, or they're still going to ask us to solve the Thieves Guild problem, because that's scripted. That's what we're supposed to do anyway. And so, like, if you're asking the question about rope, is how much bullshit do you put up with before you actually hang the players? Red's got a point here. That presupposes will you actually hang the players? Could they actually be so terrible, or so against the ethos of what you're running that you would destroy them?
Right.
I think it's more the point of how you're willing to detonate your own campaign, basically. Because it comes to a point where either this is toxic behavior, your players, we have the weasel character, the gameplay terrorist. It could be one player, it could be multiple, who just wants to, watch the world burn, and they want to take over, right? And in which case that's the conversation of whether they stay on your table or not, or maybe you're not the GM for them. But if we're just talking about giving players rope, as in actions have consequences, I think it's a matter of saying, okay, these are the consequences. Don't be afraid of laying them out. It's like, okay, you robbed the dude, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I've complained there's some games that lie about this. Like a game I have an issue with, the big game I'm going to bring up right now is Vampire. Vampire has this huge problem where they tell you, it's a masquerade. You must walk among the humans, but don't reveal yourself. Because if you did, that would make the forces rise up against you to destroy you. And they won't shut up about that. And then you go to play the game, and that never comes up. They have rules in the game that even say, like, just harvest blood whenever you want. Sure, we live in an era. Sure, earlier we mentioned you show up on security cameras, but just assume they don't apply to you. Just grab anyone off the street and suck their blood if you need your blood points back. And every published adventure that I play is like, hey, let's have an open street fight where ghouls show up with gasoline cans and set fire to an entire alleyway to try and take you out. And it's like, we set a city street on fire, that's gonna be on the news. But then you get this whole Illuminati thing of, no, the vampire control all media and cover it up, which, by the way, tastes really bad in 2016 or post 2016, and deep state kind of bullshit. And so basically, like, you're in this paradox of, you tell the players they need to have a low profile and to be subtle and to not make waves or huge mistakes because they might ripple back. And then the game gives you no tools to deal with it and sends the opposite message, that you can do whatever you want. The world is your playground.
So I guess I'll go ahead and toss the question at Red. Have you played a game or run a game where a player actually encounters consequences for breaking the masquerade?
So right now, that's a problem that I'm working on with my game. I specifically, it's something I've given a lot of thought to. We've spoken about clocks recently on some of ours.
Too.
Yeah, so that's currently the concept I'm playing with. I have had consequences for masquerade breaches, but I've used them more as narrative hooks for yeah, I've used them as narrative hooks. So, for example, there have been situations where they have had to face vampire society and they have been on trial for things that they have not been fully culpable for. But I've also had situations where I've increased police presence. There have been detectives that have gone after them. But I agree that there is nothing in the rules that actually is a concrete consequence for breaking the masquerade. It's really just there as narrative inspiration.
At the top of it, it says there's 3 rules you shouldn't break, and that's don't break the masquerade or we kill you. And that's supposed to be a rule in every single city. Period.
That's true. So
that's what they put in the text.
That's a fair point. Okay.
But you can't kill off your players.
Well,
so
you can't.
I've mentioned
you
before.
could.
Yeah, you could. I've mentioned before that usually my ethos is make sure the players are having fun. If they're not having fun, what the hell are you doing? But when it comes to consequences, players hate consequences. And to mention the clock, when it comes to Vampire, I just put a clock down and said, I will tick this up every time something masquerade-ish happens. And immediately every player panicked.
Yeah, the Grand Theft Auto salute. I've talked quite a bit that Grand Theft Auto just put the marker right there where you can. This is where we talk about
Grand
like
Theft Auto has a funny design too, because it'll have it's not just states of the stars. The stars will blink and tell you like you are in danger or you are escaping, and it'll escalate or de-escalate from there depending on like if you get caught or something
right.
from there.
And you can have a permanent, if you walk around in a tank or with a bazooka, you have a permanent 3 or 4 star. Now, I mean, this is the weird thing of where we talk about role playing versus role playing, as in role ELE versus LL, because the idea that combat is formalized and has numbers and attack rolls and positioning, all that kind of stuff. But anything else, like social issues, we're going to wishy-washy around that. And the GTA star rating is like a formal number. This is 1 through 5 or 0 through 5 stars. If there is a number up here, you have heat on you and bad things are happening. And it doesn't ruin the immersion of the game. In fact, it makes you feel like a criminal because it makes you want to stealth. You've got this problem, like GTA is one of the few games that deals with rope very well. If you're willing to lump through a 1 or 2 star rating, or even if you're willing to lump through the 5-star rating to just kill everybody and run out of here, then that's your conscious choice. But I want to get it here, like the idea is you've been informed of that choice. The problem with Vampire the Masquerade is they tell you, don't break the masquerade or we'll just kill you. And as I mentioned before, the threat of death only works once. Because you can only, if you're going to threaten to kill somebody, you have to kill somebody. If you don't do it, you've got your players will catch on that this isn't happening. Or, and they'll just keep doing it. And so there's no reinforcement. There's no rope at play.
So when it comes to Vampire, at the very least, I think that they are, they don't tell you how it is supposed to go, but they do at least imply it, and you could maybe catch on that what's supposed to happen here is that you are basically a vampire in a corrupt system. When someone catches you breaking the masquerade and realizes that they get to bring you in on consequences for that, they are supposed to sell their silence by having you do stuff for them.
Right, and
they were supposed to have a corrupt system that builds up to, of course nobody is going to get killed for breaking the masquerade, because I want to get a reward for catching you for it.
Or I covered up your omissions here. Or when we made when my company made the
I am blackmailing you now. That's the story that's supposed to be happening there.
Well,
but I think Vampire doesn't explicitly state this is how you should do it.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up blackmailing, because like the problem of saying if you do bad things, I'm going to kill you. That almost that you can't just like point at the character and say, and then your throat was cut and you just died. Broke the masquerade, game over. Players would throw a fit or talk about what a terrible GM you are. A video game could do this to them, but they just restore from a save game and go on. But you can't do that in a role-playing tabletop game. So your players, would insist that you'd have to game it out. And now you're doing a combat scenario to kill one player. There's no winners here because you're supposed to be teaching the player a lesson. And I think Griffin has the good point of, well, what if we blackmailed them, or what if other like vampires revoked your privileges, like saying because you've been like this, we're taking some of your ghouls away, or we're taking your house away because your house isn't yours, you're legally dead. So, we're evicting you and making you live in the sewers for a while until you can learn to behave yourself or something like that. But those are all things we, right here at this table, we're making this up.
Yes.
That's not stuff you will actually see in the books.
It's stuff that should be in the text.
It should be in there. And instead you get, like I said, you get the opposite messages of keep the masquerade. By the way, blood feeding is trivial.
Mm-hmm. At the very least, though, in Vampire, you could at least imply that these things are here. And when you propose to the players, they would probably accept it and realize, like, yeah, that makes sense. If you're playing a game like Dungeons & Dragons, there's no consequence other than death.
Well,
and even then, players assume it's not even there.
I mean, that's why I want to focus on, I think Blades in the Dark, Blades in the Dark had the right idea. Blades in the Dark wanted to be an urban fantasy. And the problem is if you played D&D, especially Eberron, you realized early on, like you just said, that urban fantasy doesn't work in D&D. You're incredibly well-armed, you're dungeoneers with disintegrate spells, and like the concept of law is an abstraction at best. So, and also most of your abilities aren't designed, your characters aren't designed for urban environments. You're designed for combat and dungeon. So when Blades in the Dark did the intelligent thing of deciding, okay, we're going to set up an entire grid of factions, and we're going to put up, obviously where you can see it, what each of these factions think of you. And so if you do something that pisses some of them off, they will hate you. And there's a thing in the game called the event roll that can be modified by how much people hate you or like you. So there's a tangible response to it, like there's a formal response in the coding, and that makes it feel more like an urban setting. Like I've always been railing, like a lot of times people will complain that their fantasy world isn't big enough, like it's got to be big as Earth or larger and have all these locations. And I'm a bigger fan of Blades in the Dark and Ironclaw, which say we're gonna have a small enough map that if you're pissing people off, they're still local enough to you that it matters that they hate you, or matters that they like you, because you can go to friendly and unfriendly places, which will make the game feel more like a living, breathing world rather than a bunch of dungeons that we're looting.
Yeah. And I think just having that system there too also gives the players the desire to invest in it. When they see, like, wait a second, these guys like us, they immediately start becoming more friendly to them and will reciprocate even further and make them allies instead of just good acquaintances.
Yeah, it's a problem you have in Star Wars, where in the Star Wars games, there's the Empire, who are the bad guys, and then the Rebels, who are the good guys. So even though they keep introducing reputation rules in different versions of the Star Wars games, no one gives a shit. The Empire are the bad guys. I don't care if they hate me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because I think the focus it's on direct fighting instead of saying, if you're a rebel, how do you build up a rebellion, right? How do you survive as a rebel if you're not, if you have contests that can shelter you and places where you can get supplies and safe houses and stuff like that? Mm-hmm. So it's not, the focus shouldn't be on the Empire, because you're going to fight the Empire. It should be on everyone else.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the rebellion? Why would people side with you? You have to convince them, right?
Right.
And why would people not side with you? Why would they side with the Empire? Oh, they're evil people too, who just want to,
Yeah.
evil.
In fact, I'm glad that Griffin brought this up, because I wanted to introduce the concept of rope, as in the idea of, like, all too often it's too much of an abstraction. It's like if you're playing a game like Shadowrun, either the police are coming to arrest you or they're not. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way that the GM has to punish you for blowing up the gas station, that the police are coming to kill you in a combat, rather than, like interim levels, like what level of violence or obviousness are we willing to do? Like, one thing that came up in our Bleeding Edge Cyberpunk game that I wish more games would do is, when you hack stuff, the higher profile your hack is, the more profile points it builds for you. And profile is kind of like a star rating. The higher it is, the more people are paying attention to you. So there's a lot of times in the game where when you're hacking something, you could I just win. I'm in. I'm the Pentagon. I'm in. But because it was a higher profile system, it builds more points, which gets more attention, whether you succeeded or failed. So it's the question of, how much profile are you willing to build during this crime? And the skill rolls are to avoid rope. They're to avoid getting attention, because then there's another subset of things of attention is you lose your money because it's the future. They can freeze your finances. Other people start extorting you, like Griffin pointed out.
Yeah.
It's things that players hate, like losing their stuff, losing their money, and losing their agency. It's you can't punish players with a combat, because that's what a role-playing game is. It's combat, isn't it? So giving them a fight is a reward.
Shadowrun 5th edition has a reputation system, which is basically essentially means the more well-known you are, the less likely you get jobs, and those jobs are going to pay less. And eventually, if you just expose to the public, you lose your character. Right? Yeah, everybody knows who you are. Yeah, then
as we just mentioned in our previous stream, is any GM literally going to turn to the troll with the bazooka and tell them, "Okay, we're going on an adventure today, but you're not allowed to come"?
Yeah. Right, that would be awkward all around, ultimately.
Right,
I mean, that wouldn't necessarily be the player's fault. They told you what they wanted to do with their character. They said, I want to be a troll with the rocket launcher.
Right there, intelligent design. It was like rocket launcher was in the book with which you could just buy. There's like no restrictions or class of, weird things. You could buy a freaking laser. Well, in the early editions, you could buy the laser gun. It's like, it's like they tell you you're supposed to be a Shadowrunner, and then they give you these beautiful pictures of these giant orcs and trolls walking around in daylight with assault rifles like it ain't no thing. And so you're sending mixed messages. Also a player, if they were the, troll samurai, they would get pissed off because it was like, hey, I picked troll and samurai. Didn't you know I wanted to get in fights? Isn't that part of the game to get in fights? And you have a toxic relationship going on.
Right, and at what point do you punish the players for the thing the game told you to do? Which technically should be, wait a second, that's the point of the game. Why am I punishing my players?
Right. So reputation, being too obvious, the player should be informed that, that's what I was getting as informed risk. I don't have a problem with players being obvious. It's the question of whether you're willing to take it. Like I remember in the Blades in the Dark game, there was one scenario that I enjoyed for me, which is where I'm enjoying my buddies are about to get in trouble, about to get discovered by the cops. So I say, screw it. I pull out my giant gun and blow up a police wagon. Hey, look at me. I'm blowing up police wagons because I was willing to take the heat for my friends and get those guys to come chase me and deal with me while they committed the crime. In that way, I'm deliberately doing this in a way to provoke the game. But that wouldn't work in a game where heat wasn't a concept or that sort of thing, wasn't a risk. We'd just be getting a big fight. I should be shooting the cops rather than doing property damage.
Right, and players making a tangible choice and accepting the consequences is definitely one thing. But I think sort of on the table most of the time is that players maybe don't realize that their actions could be leading to consequences in the first place. Like there's no idea that this could have an effect on the rest of things. Sometimes that's motivated by the GM never follows up on anything, so you don't care. But sometimes it's literally just wait, what do you mean that he called the police afterwards? I thought we killed them all.
Well, and say it with me here, the paradox. This is a game and people play it to have fun. Consequences aren't fun. So the player may, I have met players who get actively confused. What do you mean what I did today is bad? It says on my sheet that I'm a chaotic evil warlock or that, I'm a Malkavian who does silly things and confuses people in public, or I'm a troll with a bazooka. The game said I could do this, I bought this, and then I did this, and now you're telling me that it's bad. So the player is like, this is a stupid game and you're a bad game master. I'm going to stop playing. And later what they'll just say is yeah, I tried the game, but I didn't enjoy it. That's the kind of, they won't vocalize that. And once again, we're getting mixed messages here where the game, games like Shadowrun and Vampire need to do a better job of communicating to the players that, like Vampire has a humanity scale. Why doesn't it have a masquerade scale in it? You could do it just like you did humanity. You do this level of stupid and you get this much.
The hilarious thing is that when they made Bloodlines, the game that everyone loves, they did exactly that. They gave you a masquerade scale, and if you went down too low, it would literally just start spawning cops all the time. Which, given the game, that's actually kind of bad because you don't want to be fighting them all the time. It will drain your resources, you won't get them back, and it will make getting anywhere impossible.
Well, that's also because getting blood in the video game Bloodlines is non-trivial. You have to find someone in an obscure place, and there's a finite number of people that you can drain. And you also have to be careful not to completely kill them in the process. So but that's a game that's actually juggling that. To me, that was the appeal of a game like Vampire the Masquerade of, I've got superpowers, but I can't use them because, first of all, people aren't supposed to know I have them. And secondly, using them uses up blood, which will expose me to harm. Those were things I wanted. But then I get to the table and that never comes up as an issue. And I can't speak for other people. Maybe I just hate fun, but I'm just disappointed that the Masquerade isn't an issue in my daily affairs. And then if I start playing the game like Masquerade isn't an issue in my daily affairs, that's when the GMs start getting upset that Rafferty's not paying the proper obeisances, as it were. And that's where we're getting mixed messages. And that's why, basically, if we're talking about rope today, it's the concept of giving players leeway to make mistakes, but it's rope. We're letting you know that the more of this that you're doing, the greater risk you're taking. It's informed risk.
I think that's the key, because I feel like we're falling down the hole, which we always do, about design. Like, yes, ideally when we make our games, they should be made better. The games that we're playing have flaws that could be corrected in future versions, and this is like the design philosophy. But I am maybe at this point more interested in, from a game master perspective, of how you can inform people of these concepts through the gameplay. Like, how do you do that? How do you let people know, okay, you're in this situation, you want to rob the Duke? Do you tell them up front, hey, you should know that this is going to be challenging and that the consequences shall be severe. You should know that in the game that I'm running here, I care very much about the simulation of this world, and I'm not going to let you basically put on a funny accent and convince the guard that you're actually like,
but
gender
here
swap nobility.
I want to build on what you're saying, where, yeah, we're talking about game design, but it's this weird paradox. Like I said, it's this weird paradox you're getting into of where ROLE playing is abstract. The game master will just vaguely tell you that you're getting in trouble. But when it comes to playing your own game, you'll homebrew your own rules and make changes. I've decided bows do a D8 damage. Or whatever, or I've changed it so druids don't automatically shapeshift. Those are formal changes. So what we're getting at here is the problem we're running into in a lot of games is notions like politics or law breaking or heat are abstract. And even if you as a game master are going to explain to your players, this is a thing, it's also an abstraction. So they don't understand it the way they understand that I went from 80 hit points to 60 hit points, or my morality dropped from 7 to 6 because I stole a pack of gum. That's something that is concrete and they can understand. And really what I would say, like the suggestion here is, why are we doing it abstractly? Like why is blood points and or your vampire ranking is a number? If you're a knight or a baron, that's a specific number of ranking. Why are those concrete? But when you're doing house rules as a GM, why is, fate or like heat or rope, why are you treating that so abstractly of, I might do something against you, but I haven't clarified what it is?
Well,
I would love to see someone make a concrete politics system, a formal system of going through politics.
So, I mean,
but I guess you could just play Traveler. That's
the danger, right? Because I think you have a good point, Raph, but I also think that way lies Torchbearer. There are games that do try to model these every aspect of the game world in very, very concrete ways, and sometimes it works, but also you can get into situations where it is overcomplicated, or like with D&D, it is another rule that players find needless, and so they just ignore it anyway because they think that it's too much.
I think we're missing something here. Sorry to interrupt. Because I think when we talk about consequences, we have to talk about consequences that the players actually care about, which is, I think, Rafferty was hinting.
Right, like I said earlier, if the token way to punish somebody in Shadowrun is to have cops show up and kill them, and that's yay, combat. Combat is not punishment.
Yeah, but not only that, I mean, it's like, I think the part of to expand on this is that often, again, I talked about how the separation between the characters, the player characters, and the world, right? That the player characters are in the world, but they're not part of it. And so when you will have the thinking, and I'm just running around and doing stuff, and robbing the Duke is, again, it's just an NPC. I know it's an abstraction. I don't care if I look at him. It has nothing to do with me. If you throw the guard at me, I just fight them or run away from them, whatever. And the only thing I may feel bad about is that you're making it hard for me to play the way I want to play. But if mechanics tie your players to the world, not entirely, Sarah, but in some areas, and you say, okay, if you do this, this is the area where you're mechanically you're going to suffer. So, for example, contacts. One of many things that player likes to do with contacts is abuse the hell out of them. right? They think it's a bonus. They can do whatever they want. These contexts have to do what they want because they're NPCs. But what if you have a mechanic that says, okay, you abuse your context, and now you earn yourself an enemy, right? You have yourself an enemy now. Things are going to be more difficult going on. But if you can treat your contacts well, then you might get an ally and they might be better at you and more helpful later down the line. By creating that mechanical connection to the world, I make the argument here, and just an example, that they know what's going to happen and they know the consequences because they are in, right. And it's not simply go to combat and kill and die. It's like, I'm going to make myself, I'm trading short-term enjoyment perhaps for long-term suffering.
Well, and I think Lessons is hitting on the head. Like, if we talk less punitive about it, I've always been complaining about exceptionalism versus simulationism. Are the players special people in the world, and the world caters to them as an amusement park, or are they living in a living, breathing world? And in games like, Shadowrun or Vampire, you're supposed to be in a living, breathing world. Like, you are a criminal, and there's authorities that can punish you. So, what Lessons just brought up is, like, we also don't ever see very much of the opposite. You did something nice for someone else, so they give you something in return. A lot of GMs are under the philosophy of, I can't just give the players stuff. It's supposed to be a challenge. And we live in the era of intelligent design, where you can't just get, nobility. You have to pay for that with points.
It's so baffling, that mindset, too. It's like, I can't just give players anything. What's the treasure and amount of gold on a wolf?
Right, but also in Shadowrun or Vampire, Shadowrun you get money, but in Vampire, there's like, in theory, you gain status, but what is that? And like I said, there's the mixed message of you're supposed to pay points for that. That's a merit. So, giving them concrete benefits of, like, someone saying, like, hey, you helped me out, you helped my clan out with this problem, I'll solve a problem for you. Like, when someone, like, because I've been a player before, and I've said things like, hey, why don't we just, call our buddies at the Met, since we solved their art problem, and ask them to get us invited to this charity. A good GM might let me in, but a bad GM might not understand, no, the adventure's scripted that you guys have to use stealth to get in here, and squash that. So yeah, I guess I'm always focused on the punishments, but there's also, like, often a lack of rewards of being stealthy or being nice and staying within the rules and playing politics and playing by the rules, giving you tangible rewards. If it's too linear, punishments and prizes are meaningless. So yeah, no, I would agree with Lessons there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you go back.
I was just going to stick up for Vampire again, too. It's a really, if we can take a moment and just talk about Vampire game design for a second, because I think there is something very interesting that is sort of tangential to this conversation, which is not really about this, but I feel like we've been touching on the sort of the gray line between hard and fast mechanical consequence and sort of like this narrative, I'm going to say wishy-washy sort of approach. A lot of games will say, oh, you probably shouldn't do a thing because if you do, bad things can happen. And in parentheses, and your GM will figure out what that means for you in the context of your game. This is a design philosophy that I think is very pervasive in the 5th edition of Vampire and in a lot of other World of Darkness stuff. And they kind of split the difference. I think they're trying to split the difference in a lot of ways because they do this thing where they will throw arbitrary not arbitrary, but they'll throw point values onto abstract concepts, right? Like your hideout, your best friend, and your favorite gun can all have dot values between 1 to 5. And what does that mean? Like, we don't really know. It's actually, in many cases, not even really, like, qualified within the rules as written. We just know that I have a 3-dot hideout, which presumably means that it's better than your 2-dot hideout, but not as good as someone else's 4-dot hideout. And I think the very act of assigning mechanical points to these concepts does do something to a player's brain where it does make them regard these things as having mechanical weight and consequence, even if really what you're doing is just providing narrative avenues for how the story can unfold.
Right, because
That
you
makes
could always
sense.
threaten to downgrade that in some way,
Exactly.
which, as we've mentioned, is a thing you could do. You could take away some of the player's money. You go from 4 to 3 dots. That's your consequence of what just happened.
Yeah, and I kind of want to flip this around, saying like there's a controversial rule in Vampire. Like Vampire 5th Edition still has morality, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And so
humanity.
Well, okay, so yeah, which is actually a problem. Back when it was morality for normal people, it was they had a scale of numbers, and if you chose to do a crime such as grand theft or manslaughter, then you would have to make a roll, or there was a random chance that you suffered morality loss, that your number went down, which made you less likable. And the other thing that was the danger was you might get a neurosis, and they were all bad. Like there were just negative numbers to shit. It's not like this like Call of Cthulhu enabling, like now I'm a pedophile or whatever. It was instead like specific penalties to your rolls. Now that was a very concrete rule, and it was easy to understand. World of Darkness was the first game where, as a player, I felt like I shouldn't just go around wantonly killing people. I think that guy might be a monster or a bad guy, but I can't just hit him with my car. I could kill him, and that would cause a morality loss. So immediately, like I'm thinking not like a gamer, but like a player. And I just thought of when we mentioned this aloud, it's like, well, you could easily do a masquerade rating exactly the same way. That draining someone completely of blood is rated at level 6, and massacring a town or using celerity or potence on camera would be rated at a 4, and do masquerading exactly the same way with random chances of losses. It wouldn't even be a new rule. But I think like Vampire is showing a slight problem of design, where instead of having masquerade as a mechanic that would be in our faces constantly and all the time, they have humanity in our faces, which is supposed to be that if you're doing sort of certain enormities, you might lose it. And they also let you sell back your humanity for more points, which is like the dumbest rule I've ever seen.
The latest edition, at least, or at least of Requiem 2nd Edition, doesn't let you do that anymore.
They don't let you do that anymore.
Good.
They finally figured out that there was no downside to this. You sell it back, get more points, and I don't care. It's just interesting that that they change morality to humanity for vampires, but then keeping the masquerade up has nothing to do with your humanity. Which is weird, because you think keeping your masquerade up would have everything to do with your humanity.
Yeah, I think like the best case scenario is that they do have like their vice and virtue, mask and dirge kind of like parallels, and those are supposed to be the things that like represent that aspect. But maybe it's not fully thought out because like that's attached to willpower, not necessarily attached to humanity or anything.
I think it's the odds of Vampire is very much a let's go have fun. You get to be cool, handsome, beautiful, and have superpowers, stuff you probably don't have in real life. I mean, I'm pretty sure Red's got superpowers, but the rest of you I'm not so sure about.
Sorry, guys. But I'd like to keep that. Can we edit that, actually?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. I didn't realize I mentioned that on air. So anyway, it's the idea that the game's supposed to be fun. Like I keep saying, games are supposed to be fun, so you're supposed to be empowered. And you've got a crisis of editing where some of the stuff in the game in Shadowrun and Vampire is go out, have fun, blow things up, stab with knives, lift cars, walk on walls, control mines, all really cool, is at odds with the other writers who might be saying this is supposed to be a mature game, and you're part of a simulation, a living city that's around you. And I guess as the game host, like I would wrap all this up with the whole rope discussion of saying, like, I really would suggest not being abstract with your players. It's a game, and people are here to relax. And I think we've seen that stuff like Grand Theft Auto and Bloodlines can make, and Blades in the Dark can make these numbers a thing you can see on the sheet. And so we need to dismiss this concept of social and role playing and that kind of stuff is always abstract and numbers are only for combat. Don't go too far like Torchbearer. I'm with you on that. Like Torchbearer, I think is not. Torchbearer is an example of not solving the problem. Vampire, like I said, has a solution staring them in the face. And if you just the concept of rope here is informing your players that things are getting worse and then incrementally making things worse. And I guess the last thing to reinforce is you're doing things players don't like. You're removing money, agency, and resources, not just sending cops to come kill them.
I want to add something else, because one has to be careful not to make it feel like it's random. That whatever happens has to be direct, short-term or long-term connection to whatever the player is doing that is the setting of the rope. Because it feels like if it's random punishment, then you're attacking the players and not following the natural progression of things, right?
I would say it's okay if they're using things like stealth and making... It would even be okay if they're trying to make stealth or deceit rolls to conceal what they're doing, which would be random, because once again, intelligent design, they would only be able to pass stealth checks and deceit checks and diplomacy and bribery checks if they bought those skills. Therefore, those skills should work. Instead, what you see is there's no point in carrying concealable weapons in Shadowrun. They do less damage than the rocket launcher, and both of them get the same results.
Gotta have your troll cannon. But yeah. Red, you were about to say something too.
Was I something profound?
So.
Probably, like earth-shaking. I think what I was going to say was that I think it's important also from a running perspective to be clear with your players and to sort of discuss the logic sometimes about what is happening. That's something that I try to do anyway. And I guess we kind of did just say this, but for me, it's like in the moment, the way that I try to express the laws of the world as they exist to my players at the table at game time is to say things like, okay, well, you did this, and because of that, this guy feels a certain way, and because of that, you are taking a penalty on this next roll. Or if they're going to do something that strikes me as, on its face, a bad idea, I won't say, you shouldn't do that, but I'll say, I will just warn you that in this situation, your actions could be perceived in this way. And the most likely outcome, the common knowledge that anyone in this world would have in this circumstance would be, oh, you're going to get arrested. They're going to kick you out. They're going to kill the hostages, whatever it is. Just give them that warning that there's something at stake for their actions. And don't spring it on them, because when you do that, that's when people start to get very, very angry.
I think you and Lessons got onto the same thing here, that it does need to be consistent, and it does need to be concretely tied to what the players have done. And informing them is like, yeah, you did this thing, there will probably be something coming.
Well, and
it's a good part of communication.
I got to reinforce, so it's got to be partial. I keep hearing that, you're going to bring the hammer down. And it's kind of like, if the only consequence is ejecting the player character from the game, that's going to be a big deal. Like telling a player your character has to leave now because they're too obvious, like the Shadowrun reputation system. That's either going to start a fight because the player's really attached to their character, or the other thing you're going to run into is you get some players who just burn through characters and don't give a shit. They'll just have, like once again, the theory behind rope was, okay, once this number gets to 5, my character has to leave. Okay, my troll guy shows up, blows a bunch of stuff. It was great. It was worth it. Scrap it. Right now I'm going to ride my orc with a rocket launcher and just, burn through characters that way because that's fun. And now you haven't solved any problem because you haven't encouraged the player to, play the game in a mature way. They've just decided they're just going to burn through all of it because, once again, you told them it was okay.
Yeah, I brought like a stack of 20 trolls today. Let's see how many get killed.
I guess it is important to have the understanding of what the consequences can be as well, right? Players should know if character death is on the table, and they should know what it means. I mean, so I'm thinking about there's D&D, again, it's very obvious what, player death is the consequence, and depending on who you're playing with, it probably isn't going to happen, or we're probably going to hand wave it. But there's other games that I've been reading that are very interesting because they are like, they present in the text other consequences that you probably want to avoid, but they're not framed in negative ways. So what am I saying? Specifically, the Alien RPG, the Alien RPG. I think it might be by the same company that does the Forbidden Lands. I have to check that. But they have these mechanics in there where the party, much like in an Alien movie, you might start all working together, but there are characters that might be at cross purposes, and it may come to a point where the characters are working against the rest of the party. And when that happens, you get a scene where the character does their big reveal, and then that character is no longer a player character. It gets controlled by the game master, and the person who is playing that character gets another character to replace. It's basically like effectively a player death. But I think it's very interesting.
I agree with you. It's interesting, but that's different because that's a game where we set it. I mean, you're talking paranoia territory where we set it up that at some point there will be programmed betrayals into the game. I'm talking more like when you want to run a game like Shadowrun or Vampire or a mature themed game where you want players to be transgressive, that they are going to break laws and do bad things, but they're supposed to keep that under control. We're running into the problem situation here where, like, Aliens is just, hey, I've revealed that I'm an asshole, and you just take it out. Or, like I just said with Shadowrun, I'll just be an asshole all the time and keep recycling characters over and over again because I'm not interested in playing a mature game. I'm interested in playing an upset the apple cart game. And so, we have to talk about, like, is there ways you can communicate to the players or get them to have some buy-in that being transgressive and learning when to go too far and when to stay there, the Masquerade should be a fun challenge, not something so trivial that we ignore it or a whammy punishment that shows up out of nowhere.
Right. No, I agree. I think that what I'm trying to get at is just that the parameters of what is and is not a consequence change from game to game, and that there's other ways to structure these things. I don't disagree about what you're talking about. I just think I'm talking about something else.
All right, so let's go ahead and get some final thoughts in then. You wanted to say something, so let's get you.
Yeah, first. I think because also we're going close to the territory of problem players as well. Because yes, you can have the one player who wants to burn all the characters, and that's fun for them. But I would remind them also that another consequence is that they're not playing alone. There's other people on the table. So, it's like, oh, yeah, you're playing your game. Is everyone else on the same level as you are? If everybody's, doing wacky hijinks, that's cool. But if you're the one person that consistently is doing, nope, I'm going to have 20 trolls and they're all going to be, go to the highway and destroy all cars they meet. It's like, yeah, but we're supposed to be sneaking into the headquarters of the bad guys. That's, I think, that goes beyond the rope. That has nothing to do with the rope. That is more player attitudes and the table
sort of the reverse loader mulch. Where instead of the one player who's trying their genuine best, you have one person who comes in and is going to bring everyone else down with them.
Yeah, but as I'll if everybody's playing on the same level, more it's just characters are they just want to see what happens. You take the coil of rope, you put it on the table, says, "Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this is the rope. This is what can happen."
All right. Rafferty, you got anything to add on top of what you've already added?
I would also, I would kind of add to that, and I have the opposite problem where I show up at a game and I feel like, okay, the challenge now is going to be to juggle getting stuff done versus discovery or going too far, and then I discover I can't go too far because either they'll just kill my character instantly or everyone's just blowing everything up. I need to bring up I have the opposite problem where I feel like none of this actually matters because we've talked about linear games before and everything. If there is no concept of rope at all, the idea that people are trying to measure this and trying to reduce their profile and control this, then you wind up in a game where none of this happens. And to me, I can't enjoy Vampire because almost every game I'm in, it's like that. Only the vampires matter. We do vampire stuff. Masquerade never comes up. Or Shadowrun. we're just rocket launchering stuff, blowing the shit out of stuff. It might as well just be D&D with guns. And it's, unless that exists as something that we can manipulate and control and shows up to slightly inconvenience us or remind us that it's a thing, then I'm not feeling it. And to me, I'd rather be in a world that has more. I gravitate more towards the games where maturity and sensibility of design decision of what my character does is rewarded. If I just want to go blow crap out of stuff, I can go play Fortnite.
All right, and Red, what do you got?
I don't really have anything to add. I surrender my time. I'll double down on what I said before. Is that I think that I do like letting the players sort of steer the ship, or I like giving people rope, like what Lessons was getting at. I want players to feel like they have agency to try things, but if nothing that they do carries any kind of consequence, then nothing matters ultimately. So I want the characters to push so I can push them back. That might not be something that a lot of people want to sign up for their fun activity time, but that's what makes a horse race, I guess.
I mean, I did want to say, related to that, it's also like, if you're playing a character who's nice and restrained, but everyone else is just balls to the wall crazy, and nothing's happening to them either, then you don't have a rope system.
Right, and I think like Red and Rafferty have said here, like I want to sit down to a mature game that has stuff happen. I don't want to necessarily be pandered to where, oh yeah, we're just going to forget that this happened. It's like, no, I wanted stuff to happen. I wanted to see these things happen because my expectations and plans revolve around the idea that the consequences are happening. And like Rafferty said, I got lots of options if I just want to blow stuff up. I could go play Fortnite. I could do anything else. I'm not starved for those choices. And the reason we're here is to see something slightly more mature happen. Or at least, well, I am anyway. So, I think that'll go ahead and be it for this episode of Notes for the Aleph. We stream episodes bi-weekly Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can come join us live at twitch.tv/Ractus. We also stream and record weekly tabletop games at the same channel, and you can come join us when we start at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norman Rafferty here is a partner and writer for Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com. Join us on the Reddit and Twitter, and look forward to the upcoming Book of Corals Ironclaw expansion book. Be sure to check out RedRabbit and book it for a game over at startplaying.games as RedRabbit, and be sure to check out Lessons Learned at Lessons Learned 1 on YouTube and Twitter. And be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and come see us all again. Until next time, everybody.